What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. You all voted for it. Here I am responding. Here is Vendread. Now, the month is October, the month that this video is going to be coming out in, and what I'm trying to do is make all the decks kind of thematic, where I want them to be scary in one way or another. Like this week I had a Dogmatica, where if you're the opponent, getting almost your entire extra deck ripped turn one, that's pretty scary. The last video was Mermail. Getting your whole hand ripped, that's terrifying. Now this deck is going to be terrifying or scary for another reason. And the main thing that's so scary about it is how scary bad it is. Like, it's genuinely not good. I really wish it was good too. Like, I tried my absolute hardest, but this is what I ended up with. There is another variation of the deck that you would be able to potentially do, although it would be a lot more gambly, and with Vendreads you really don't want to gamble because these cards need each other in order to like function in the slightest, because the archetype is a disaster. So if you wanted to do something else than what the list is showing you right here, I would recommend going 60 cards, including more generic zombie stuff and like that grass looks greener plus triple copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, although that would drastically increase the price of this deck. But regardless, let's stop yapping. Let's get into the deck profile. Here is Vendread. Now, Vendread is a ritual zombie archetype that, like, the main card is Vendread Slayer, which gets different effects based on what materials you use to ritual summon it. The main downside is the ritual materials have to be from on field in order to gain any sort of effects, and the best two effects that you can give your Slayer, at least in my opinion, is going to be making it untargetable, as well as giving it a quick effect, banish a special summon monster your opponent controls. That's it. No negation, no nothing, no silly business. Quite literally, the idea of Vendreads as a whole is to stack up this one guy and just go ham. So let's go to the card by card and let me know, and let me tell you what I think this deck can do. We are on Triple Scar of the Vendread. This is some new card support. If this card is sent to the graveyard, we can add a Vendread spell or trap from our deck to our hand. If a monster on the field is tributed while this card is in our graveyard, except during the damage step, we can banish one other zombie from our graveyard, special summon this card, and if you do while it's face up in the monster zone, you cannot special summon except for Vendreads specifically. And you can use each effect of Scar once per turn. This card is great. Being able to add our Vendread spells when it's sent to the graveyard by any mean is really cool. Being able to banish a zombie is relevant for our generic zombie support, as well as for some of our other Vendreads, specifically Vendread Anima. And that last effect to Reborn, it might seem a little clunky because it locks you into Vendreads, although you can just use it as link material to go into a Vendread Slayer. I mean Savior, my apologies. I mixed them up. But this card is quite good, and we are playing 3 of it because it is also a level 6, which is quite relevant for the associated ritual card. We're on 1 copy of Vendread Revenants, 1 copy of Hound Horde, 1 copy of Anima, and 1 copy of Streges, as well as 1 copy of Core. These are all the main Vendread cards. These are all pretty tutorable in the deck. Since we're playing generic zombies, we just dump them and bring them back from the graveyard, or we can banish them and bring them back from banishment with Anima specifically. And each of these cards are going to give our Slayer a different effect. But first, let's go over their first effect. Remnants, if this card is in your possession destroyed by an opponent's card by battle or card effect, you can special summon it, but banish it and it leaves the field. Hound Horde says if this card's in your graveyard, you can pitch a Vendread card to special summon it, but banish it and it leaves the field. Anima has the effect where you can banish it from your graveyard, trigger one of your banished Vendreads, except for itself, and special summon it, and then you're locked into zombies for the rest of the turn. And then Streges says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can reveal a Vendread in your hand, special summon this card, but banish it and it leaves the field. And then lastly, we have Core, able to banish one other zombie from our graveyard to special summon itself. Now, the best two, in my opinion, is going to be Anima and Core. Core being able to at least bring itself back out for banishing a card, and Anima being able to grab back your banished Vendreads, because they all otherwise will banish themselves, is quite powerful. Although the primary effects of most of these Vendreads, like Revenants, Hound Horde, and even Striges to an example, or Streges to an extent, is just ass. They're just not good. Revenants being like the worst offender, you need your opponent to actually remove it, and like they're never gonna do that in a way that you would like them to. This card is just really bad, and you never want to see it. You always want, but this is like the best one. That's like, you see, that's like the dichotomy of the deck. This is like the best effect that it gives your Slayer, but it sucks. It sucks so much ass. But the actual effects that each of these monsters would give the Slayer is Revenant, again, will once per turn quick effect target a special summon monster your opponent controls, banish it. Hound Horde says once per turn quick effect target a spell trap your opponent controls, banish it. Anima says any monster destroyed by battle with this card is banished. Striges says after damage calc, if this battle opponent's monster, you can draw a card, discard a card, and then Core gives it targeting protection. Now these are just qualities that they'll give exclusively to a Vendread that's ritual summoned using these cards. So all the Vendreads can gain these effects, although the best one that you really want to be stacking these effects on is ideally going to be either the Slayer or the Executor. But these cards are all very mid. Like again, Core, Revenant's effect are the best. The best graveyard effects is Core and Anima. And I guess Striges is pretty alright. But that's it for our Vendread Pringles. Now let's get on to our rituals. We're on triple copies of Vendread Slayer. We really want to be seeing a ritual in our hand like all the time, and this is the best one. You can ritual summon this card with any Vendread ritual spell once per battle. If this card battles an opponent's monster after damage calc quick effect, you can banish one zombie from your graveyard. This card gains 300 attack permanently. If this ritual summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one ritual spell from your deck to your hand, and if you do, send one Vendread monster from your deck to the graveyard. And you can only use this effect of Slayer once per turn. So we can't loop that graveyard effect over and over again, but even getting it once is really great, especially if we just summon it with like nothing really underneath of it, like something with Scar the Vendread, for example. We can just send it to the graveyard to get some quick advantage, or even send a Vendread we would like to put underneath of it to the graveyard. So we are on 3 copies of it. Also, that attack gain effect sucks. It's like really bad, although it is a permanent gain, so if you do keep on stacking it over and over and over again, in theory, your Slayer could get really large, but that requires multiple battle phases, so, you know. We're on 1 copy of Vendread Battlelord. You can ritual summon this card with any Vendread ritual. You can banish 1 Vendread card from your graveyard to clear 1 type, monster, spell, or trap. For the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects of that type. So it's an Azathoth. It's an Azathoth, but fair, because it is an Ignition Azathoth, so we can't be doing this quick effect on our opponent's turn, unfortunately, but we can stop hand traps if we see them coming. And we have the material to get this out quickly, although it is a 7 unlike a 6, so the quickest way we realistically could bring it out is with Scar of the Vendread and its associated ritual, except that only adds up to 6 ideally, so we can't even bring out Battlelord, which is really unfortunate. And if this ritual summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 ritual monster from your deck to your hand, and if you do, send a Vendread monster from your deck to the graveyard. Now this card actually did see play in Drytron, because it adds any ritual monster. Now, Drytron is a good deck, and our Vendread rituals are genuinely not actually that bad. They all like basically float if they've been properly ritual summoned, and the floating effect is really good. But it floats into Vendread cards, and it's a Vendread card itself, so it's just not good. We're on 1 copy of Vendread Executor. You can ritual summon this card with any Vendread ritual spell. This card's name becomes Vendread Slayer while on the field. While this ritual summon card is on the field, your opponent cannot target cards you control with card effects except for this card. If this ritual summon card is destroyed by battle or destroyed by an opponent's card effect while its owner's monster zone, you can add 1 Vendread card from your deck to your hand. You can use each effective Vendread Executor once per turn. Now this card's floating effect is really good. Being able to add any Vendread card means we can add our Vendread spells and traps that aren't rituals, which are exactly 1, but it's pretty alright. As well as adding our ritual spells and any monster we could need at the time is quite good. The targeting protection is really good, especially if we put Core underneath of it, although we do have to do some quick maths for that. And otherwise, it's just pretty alright. And the main thing is it's a 3000 attack guy, which is something. Having a blue eyes is a good thing, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Our last ritual is one of the new one, Vendread's Scavenger. It is an 8. You can ritual summon this card with any Vendread ritual spell. During the main phase, quick effect, you can tribute 1 other zombie. Make this card gain attack equal to the tributed monster's original deck until the end of this turn. If you control a Vendread Slayer and this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banishment leaves the field. You can use each effective Scavenger once per turn. Now, in order to special summon it from our graveyard, we have to ritual summon it properly first, which means we have to use resources to make this card first, which sucks. This card's effect is also not very good because it's an attack gain effect during the main phase for some reason. Like, attack gain effects aren't good, don't get me wrong, but attack gain effects are a lot better when they're also just during any phase. This is exclusively during the main phase, so yeah. The one thing is, it is a quick effect, so we can dodge targeted negation if we have this on board, and then we have something, like say for example, a unizombie on board. Our opponent cannot infinite impermanence or effect veiler our unizombie, because we would just be able to tribute it off the moment they activate that. But that's it for our Vendread rituals. Notice how this one actually doesn't have a graveyard effect to add stuff. Interesting. Now let's our ritual spells. Run 2 copies of Vendread Origin. If this card can be used to ritual summon any Vendread ritual monster from your hand or graveyard, you must also tribute monsters from your hand, field, or banish zombies from your graveyard whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster your ritual summon. Now this card is really good. Like, this is a really good ritual spell. Being able to banish cards from your hand, field, or graveyard, since everything in this deck is pretty much zombie, we can do like banish from wherever, and also being able to summon cards from our graveyard, as well as protecting cards from the graveyard with itself, is just a lot of different effects on this one card, as well as just on top of it, it's not a once per turn. Like, it just ain't a once per turn. And the protection also isn't a once per turn. So we want to be playing 2 or 3 copies. I'm playing 2 copies just because we do have a lot of rituals in this deck, and there's a lot of ability to get rituals. Keep in mind, this card mentions Vendread Slayer, so this card is searchable off of a card like Pre-Preparation of Rites, which is why we're maxing out on it, of course. Run 2 copies of Ravenous Vendread. This one's a new support card. We can special summon 1 Vendread monster from our hand, deck, or graveyard in face down defense position, except for Vendread Scavenger, then apply the following effect. Ritual summon any Vendread ritual monster from our hand or graveyard by tributing monsters we control, including the monster that we special summon with this effect, whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual monster. And that is a hard once per turn, unlike the other ritual, which is why we're playing 2 of it. Now this card is interesting. It allows us to basically find whatever we're missing in order to give our Slayer the effects, although that means we have to kind of like do math beforehand. So if we want to have Revenants and Striges on, we'd have to get Striges on board, then activate Ravenous Vendread with Slayer somewhere. Then we can summon out the Revenants and then tribute Revenant Striges in order to bring out Slayer, because that's exactly 6. Or the better combination is if we have Anima, Core, and Revenants, or rather Anima and Core on board, we can then summon Revenants and do all 3, which means it's untargetable, banishes cards, and banishes cards that it destroys by battle, which is mediocre at best, to be completely honest. Like, it's a pretty alright card if you stack it with like 3 other cards, which is, you know, not reasonable in the slightest. Next ritual spell, let's stop dwelling on that. Run 1 Vendread Evolution. This card can be used to ritual summon any Vendread ritual from your hand or graveyard. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field, and or send 1 Vendread from your deck to the graveyard whose total levels equal the level of the ritual monster you ritual summon. The ritual monster is destroyed during the end phase of the next turn, very similar to Fusion Destiny, and that is a hard once per turn. The main reason we're playing 1 copy of this is because it can send a card like Scar of the Vendread to the graveyard in order to trigger that effect, or even just load up our graveyard with copies of Anima, Core, or Striges. Downside of this card, using the stuff from deck does not give the Slayer the effects, so there's that. Because the Vendreads had to be balanced, I guess. Like, I think it would still be pretty balanced even if they did just gain the effects, generally speaking, to be completely honest, but whatever. Now on to our last ritual Vendread cards in general in the main deck. We're on triple copies of Vendread Charge, being able to send a zombie from our hand or face of field to the graveyard for cost, special summoning a Vendread monster from our deck. And that is a hard once per turn. Even though it's a hard once per turn, we are playing 3 copies because this is our main way of dodging interaction like Imperm and Effect Veiler. Very similar to Scavenger, except actually good because it's a quick play spell, so we don't have to actually commit anything. We are able to basically ensure our Unizombie is able to resolve without fear of Veiler or Imperm, as long as we have a charge in hand, because when we also get to set up a Vendread monster we want on field, of course. We're on triple copies of Pre-Preparation of Rites. We're able to add Vendread Origin because it mentions Vendread Slayer, or we're able to add Ravenous Vendread because it mentions Vendread Scavenger in its text. So we can add either or, although more ideally we want to be adding Origin because we can want the Slayer more than we want the Scavenger. Although Ravenous Vendread allows us to basically special card from a deck, so it's a little bit of a decision that we really have to make. So that's another thing, is all the cards are kind of mid, but they also make you make difficult choices on what kind of mid-ass end board you want to end on. Really unfortunate. We're on one copy of Preparation of Rites. If we do play the grass version that I was talking about, we do want to be playing 3 copies of this. This just adds Slayer and can add back a ritual spell. We're on triple copies of Unizombie, double copies of Solitaire in order to fetch that Unizombie. So we're technically on like 5 copies of Unizombie, except 2 of them can get ashed and we get fucking owned. 1 copy of Gozuki, 2 copies of Mezuki, 1 copy of Shang-Chi the Spirideo, and 1 copy of Mad Baller for our generic zombie engine. Now this engine is just supposed to go into Immortal Dragon and then some random synchros in order to like interact with our opponent, and also send the Vendreads needed to the graveyard because the Vendreads really need the help in order to actually get started. And then for non-engine, we're on 2 Droplet, 1 Called By, and 1 1-for-1. Surprisingly, even with 2 Droplet in the main deck is still $18.69. Nice. And the extra is not even $10, putting the deck total to $28.37. Now let's go on to the extra. In the extra, new card PogChamp, 1 copy of Flying Mary, the Wandering Ghost Ship. It needs 2 zombies. We can target one of our level 5 or higher zombies that's banished or in our graveyard. Place this card in our spell and trap zone as a face-up continuous spell, and if you do, special summon the monster we initially targeted. While this card is a continuous spell, we can target 1 level 5 or higher zombie we control, destroy 1 monster your opponent controls with attack less than or equal to that monster, and we can lose each effect of Mary once per turn. This card's really good. When we're going second, it's both a reborn and a pop, and when we're going first, it's just a reborn. It's just a really neat card, and since our rituals work in such a way where once we ritual summon them, we can just keep reborning them as many times as we'd like, it's pretty damn good. We're on 2 copies of Vampire Sucker in order to draw cards every time a zombie comes back from the graveyard. 2 copies of Vendread Savior. This card's actually quite good in this deck. It needs 2 zombies. This card's name becomes Vendread Slayer while on the field. We use each of the following effects of a Vendread Savior once per turn. We can target 1 Vendread card in our graveyard, just add it to our hand on a once per turn. Pretty cool. And then during the damage calc, if this card battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, we can send 1 zombie monster from our deck to the graveyard, and that opponent's monster loses attack equal to the level of the monster sent to the graveyard times 200. That stands for cost, notably, as well as that happens in the damage step. So very cute stuff there. We can do some tricks if our opponent just isn't reading our cards in the slightest, which they probably aren't because we're playing Vendread. But the adding a Vendread card from our graveyard to a hand is quite good because we can add the ritual spell Origin from our graveyard right back to our hand just to use it again because it isn't a once per turn. We're on generic zombie stuff of Yugioh, Vampire Fascinator, and Yugioh the Absolute Zero Mayakashi, because this deck actually can spam a little bit of link material since a lot of the Vendreads will just bring themselves back, even though they do fucking nothing. We're on 2 copies of Immortal Dragon for zombie synchro stuff, 1 copy of Red Eye Zombie Dragon Lord, and 1 copy of Skeletal Dragon Felgrand. This deck very frequently locks into just zombies or just Vendreads, so we do really need to be careful with our locks. And then we're on generic cards of 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and 1 Access the Code Talker. Now, this deck sucks, like, don't get me wrong, but it is really cheap. It's not even 30 bucks. Like, we can even say it's under $35. That's pretty reasonable, right? However, there are so many better decks that are underneath this price point that I don't even think it's even worth considering this deck until Vendread gets more support. And I'm going to show you one deck right before I end off this video that is better than that. And now, welcome to my TED Talk. Here is a deck that is cheap as hell, that is way better than that Vendread deck, or just Vendread in general, or anything you could do with Vendread really, is Orcust. I mean, Orcust is super cheap right now. A lot of the cards have been reprinted to death, like Gearsu, super cheap. All the other Orcust stuff has always been pretty cheap, and the extra deck stuff is also super cheap. I'm not going to go over this list, like I've done plenty of Orcust deck profiles, but you notice how like this is a full list. It actually has like some hand traps, even though it's still budget as hell. It has lots of extra deck options, even though it's budget, and the main deck is pretty damn flexible. Even running cards like Phantasme, running the Dangers, running World Legacy stuff, like We're able to include multiple full engines in here without going over our price point, and while still retaining a much more competent deck. Well, that's going to be about it for the deck profile. Thank you all so much for watching. If you still are, thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, it really helps me a lot in making these videos. You can find more details at the end of all my videos, but that's going to be about it for the video. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are, and I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.